kind of application or whatever. But I could imagine it being sent to a situation where you walk into a train station and immediately an ad is sent to your phone because you've been bluejacked, because there's a transmitter somewhere that is sending out the radius, sending out message to everyone within its radius. So it's basically, I mean, I've used it in quotes because that's today's technology. But basically the idea of, if you're transmitting control signals to any kind of network or system or bunch of devices, to control them, you have to think about what stops you controlling someone else's network. I mean, this is just the same as using somebody else's Wi-Fi they've left unsecured. Now, just think about it this way. Utility phone, as we talked about, this is potentially incredibly powerful technology. The air around you, possibly around everybody, is filled with a distributed, invisible mist of nanotechnology that can do all these incredible things, like, as we described, create basically a full immersive virtual reality. And the way these, because they're not actually connected unless they need to be, these foglets, these nanobots, are communicating wirelessly. What if someone jacks your local fog network? What could they do to you? I mean, what if you're made of the foglets? You know, just think how rapidly that could go down. I mean, and even worse, imagine that you're made of foglets living in a virtual reality and you are an upload and your memories therefore are all digitally encoded. What if someone manages to jack basically you, everything about you? So they could jack what you're seeing right now, but they could also rewrite what you knew to be true about 5 minutes ago because they've got access to your memories. I mean, again, it's the whole philosophical thing of just taking all of these possibilities, bringing them together and taking them to the most, it's a reductio ad absurdum.
And how do we know this isn't already happening?
Well, exactly. Yeah, I do touch on it very, very briefly later on, but that's a simulation argument. How do you know you're not in a simulation now? I've called the talk is about extreme simulation scenarios. I've stopped short of the simulation theory, that we're living in a simulation. Actually, I don't quite stop short, I did mention it, but okay. Moral arguments. These are people telling you that a technology could or couldn't exist, but they've got some moral reasons, some non-technical reasons. So they tend to focus on risk, but they're not often concerned with overt, wholly physical risks. They're normally about something more vague yet threatening. Now, Francis Fukuyama, who knows this guy? Anybody? Yeah, okay, so he's, for those who, that's about 50%. For those who don't know, he was an advisor to President Bush, was one of the people, I believe, who was involved in advocating that stem cell research should be put on hold. He's a bioconservative, and he basically believes that transhumanism, he has come out and said in a well-known article that transhumanism is the world's most dangerous idea, and that it is damaging, and human enhancement, augmentation is damaging to human dignity. Except he's extremely vague about what that is.
It basically means religion, but we don't want to say it.
Well, exactly, yeah. But, you know. So anyway, but the whole point is that he's making all these sort of implicit claims. Like, for example, enhancement is the same as a loss of dignity, but buried in there, he's making metaphysical, as you say, sort of religious innuendo that basically, you know, well, if you're throwing away the dignity that God gave you, he won't be happy, or she won't be happy. And ironically, it's kind of alluding to sort of libertarian arguments that, you know, that being free is the same as being unenhanced, which is a theme that comes up again and again in popular culture, you know, that if you've got any kind of enhancement, then you are somehow part of a machine in sort of derogatory sense. Sorry.
It's just one thing. The upload scenario actually collides with this quite significantly.
It does.
Because the problem is that assume it's an engineering problem, because that's how I tend to approach things. You're doing an upload, it's quite possible the first generation of uploads end up as retarded kids. So you then hit the immediate ethics problem of having basically a bunch of immortal retarded children.
Or lobsters.
Yeah,
if you know what
lobsters.
Yes.
Basically.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, these things, at least you can debug them.
Well, that's the question, is it? And then, is it ethical to debug?
Yeah. And it might actually become, you know, if you're living in a world where these things are real problems, then there's probably a bunch of people out there with power who have made it their remit to tell you whether or not you are allowed to get in there and debug them. Whether, I mean, imagine a scenario where you were somehow allowed to create these unfortunate creatures, but then you're not allowed to fix them. You know, that's easily imaginable. Maybe regulation came in after you created them, or maybe...
There's allowed and there's what actually happens.
Well, exactly.
Ask anyone on Pirate Bay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, this is about mapping how many factors are in play here. Now, one last thing I will say is that when it comes to moral arguments, even though, I mean, transhumanism as it gets more popular is becoming more focused on near-term scenarios, not the kind of stuff we're talking about today, like so real biological nanomaterials, stuff like that. But possibly, you know, and that has a lot of advantages. There's things actually happening. But another advantage, ironically, is that the critics of these kind of ideas also focus on short-term biological enhancement type scenarios. You know, Francis Fukuyama is pretty much talking about genetic engineering. And even though his arguments apply to a whole lot of other possible speculative technologies, right now, most people who read Francis Fukuyama don't even imagine that this could be an ideology carried further. And if people are interested in this kind of thing, it's time to start thinking about it now. You know, don't create technology-specific principles. Create principles like constitutional principles, that whatever technology comes along, certain things should be allowed or shouldn't be allowed. Okay, metaphysics. Now, it was interesting to me, I know it was a hard question for me to say and for people to get their heads around, but the whole idea that there might be something non-physical that you would have to include in a simulation of the human mind. And this is where metaphysics comes in. So metaphysics can mean religion, but it's generally any kind of belief about that is beyond what we know about the physical world. Some kind of understanding of how the universe operates, but you're, by some definitions of metaphysics, you're making some comment about something that can't be tested or seen. Okay, so this also comes up again in a minute about category or the category of imposed or incompatible worldviews. So a lot of the time, if someone's got a worldview that's implicit but is opposed to whatever point you're trying to make, or often it will be down to their metaphysics. It might not even be detailed, probably not detailed. It's just a sense of what could or could not be that they have, that they've probably inherited from somebody and might not even be aware of who they inherited it from and what the shape of those beliefs really are. And these kind of metaphysical objections can range from pretty subtle to quite full-on. Like, so for example, with uploading, there's the idea that, you know, well, soul would be missing. You know, there's everything physical you could care to name at whatever level of description, from abstract, developmental, neurophysiological information down to quantum physics, but still there'll be something missing. And I don't care what you call it, there'll be something missing, and that's just my conviction, and that's that. Then there's the more sort of overt claim that is more moral, but it still touches on the metaphysical, which is something along the lines of God would disapprove, or whatever aspect. Doesn't even have to be sort of a religious point of view. Some aspect of the universe is incompatible with what you're saying, but it's an intuitively knowable aspect of the universe, not something that any scientist has ever observed or commented on.
Yeah. I think we just have to be quite careful here. I know you're arguing metaphysical arguments are opposed to our particular...
No. I'm just saying that this is a point that...
At the moment, it's conceivable you will get metaphysical support.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. And I also, I know it's a bit hard, but I also want to point out that all of these categories of thinking apply to anyone bringing any aspect of any argument to the table. You should be trying to break down your own thinking as much as anybody else's. And I'm not, obviously I'm coming at it from a transhumanist angle because, I mean, a lot of this will reflect my own views on things, but I'm not picking a side. But anyway, a variant of this kind of thing is the hubris argument. People will tell you that, you know, you shouldn't do this stuff, and it goes beyond moral, it's metaphysical, and that they say that is just hubristic. And they might not, basically they say you are reaching above and beyond your station in whatever that may be.
But they've been saying that since we've invented fire.
Exactly, that doesn't stop people saying it, and sometimes their saying it actually stops the thing being attempted, or being attempted in the way it might otherwise have done. And I'm not saying that that's always a bad thing or always a good thing. I'm just saying that it's a factor and it's a very real one. And it's but it is basically something